right, guys, I'm back with one last little blurb about um, cellular respiration. It's about anaerobic respiration, which means it's what happens when there's no oxygen present. So this will be really quick, but definitely want to make sure that I hit you with it. So anaerobic means no oxygen. Anaerobic respiration is also known as fermentation. So anaerobic respiration is equal to fermentation. There are two main types of fermentation. Either one is going to happen after glycolysis. So no matter what type of cellular respiration you're going to do, whether it's going to be anaerobic or aerobic, which is what was in the last video, you're always going to do glycolysis first. Always, always. And that will always happen in the cytoplasm. So I'll say like step one of this is still glycolysis. And then step two is going to depend on the organism. So if you are, zoom out a little bit, if you're an animal, you're going to do lactic acid fermentation, which will use the pyruvate to produce, obviously, lactic acid, which might contribute to muscle soreness. There's some like debate about whether lactic acid is really the source of muscle soreness or not, or part of it even. So some people think it's like tiny muscle tears, and other people think it's like lactic acid buildup, and it might be a combination of both. But your body starts to do this when you're doing intense exercise. You run out of oxygen. You're breathing really heavily. Your body needs like more energy than it can produce at that time, and so it starts using lactic acid fermentation instead in your muscles. And then the other option is that things like yeast and bacteria do something called alcoholic fermentation, which is why those things can be used to make things like beer and bread. The bread rising because of yeast is actually because of the carbon dioxide being released during fermentation. So you have these two types. Both of these types are going to produce very little ATP, so they're pretty inefficient. So I will just come down here and say that anaerobic respiration is very inefficient compared to aerobic respiration. And as you can see in this image, anaerobic respiration happens in the cytoplasm. So it's over here. This is anaerobic. This will only happen if the cell, for some reason, cannot get oxygen. So it is a unusual event for most of us, unless we're big exercisers. And then the other side of that arrow is showing what will happen if there is oxygen present, which will be the whole process that I talked about before, yielding like about 30 ATP per glucose. If you do fermentation, this is only about 2 ATP per glucose. So really super inefficient. And that's it for that. Super simple. Good job.